Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. It has become a cliché to claim that Israel is facing simultaneous threats from several quarters within it, on its boundaries, with adjacent entities and territories, and outside it. The challenges are always there, but most of the time they erupt serially rather than concurrently, and can be dealt with accordingly. In recent weeks, however, different threats seem to materialize day after day, and even on the same day, as if orchestrated by one central headquarters. Is that the reality or a mere coincidence, or perhaps some cascading influence? To explore this issue, we're joined from northern Israel by Major General in Reserve Gershon Ha-Cohen, who is an IDF Army Corps commander. Thank you for joining us, General.
Thank you very much.
Also joining us from Central Israel is Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish, who is the former IDF's Air Defense Chief. Thank you for joining us as well, General.
Thank you.
And with me in the studio, as ever, is our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir, Oren, host of Watchmen Talk, Powers in Play, and so much more. Amir, give us a broader understanding on the complexities of a multi-sector challenge for the State of Israel.
So there is no denying the output of the various threats, but does it all come from the same input? Obviously, what is happening is that because the media magnifies each particular terror act, and following the terror act, if there are fatalities, there are also funerals and speeches by politicians. It seems as if from every sector, Israel is under attack, while the reality is more mundane. There are attacks on the roads in Judea and Samaria. Sometimes there are acts of terror in Tel Aviv and other places, even though it has not been established without doubt that the most recent one, a few days ago or last week, on the beach of Tel Aviv, was indeed a premeditated terror act, but it should be counted as such until it can be crossed off from the list. Nevertheless, there are various motives, various modes. Some people are inspired by calls from Hamas or from other organizations. Some people act because of some personal history, troubled or otherwise. And it shouldn't be seen as an all-out attack on Israel, even though Iran, yes, is a threat. Hamas is a threat out of Gaza, but it likes to act out of other sectors. So it is not really as advertised.
Let's put things in context. Of course, there was the RGC Quds Force commander at the time, Major General Qasem Soleimani, who was subsequently targeted and killed by an American aerial strike, together with one of the proxy commanders of Kataib Hezbollah, Al-Muhandis, who was in that same vehicle with Qasem Soleimani, following or during the Iranian war with the Islamic State from its front. The Quds Force commander at the time sought to unify all Shiite militias and proxies to establish a sort of axis of resistance, of course, with Lebanon, Hezbollah, in Syria, establishing new Shiite militias, bringing, of course, also Afghan families to establish a certain demographic shift that would then also bolster Iranian influence in Syria. We saw in Iraq, of course, Hashd al-Shabi within that context, from the alliance of 46 militias, roughly 2/3 of which are under Iranian influence. We see, of course, the alliance between, or the clientele of the Houthi tribe that then managed, with Iranian funding, to secure alliances with other Yemenite tribes and then bolster Iranian influence in Yemen. All these various elements have ultimately one thing within their motto, and that is death to America, death to Israel, And that is something that...
And dominance over Iraq.
And dominance over Iraq, dominance over the entire region, dominance over the Sunnite Muslims. But I'd like to bring, of course, our distinguished generals into the picture. When we look at this complexity at hand, to what degree is Israel taking into account the various entities and the various strategic challenges that it poses, both holistically but also particularly in each and every case? General Ha-Cohen?
Holistically, of course, we are facing a new combination of alliances. Actually, the Iranians are orienting themselves to a new approach of really deploying coalition forces. It is not yet that there is one headquarter in Tehran, that every action is by central control directed like in a movie by the movie director, that every angle of the camera is absolutely under control. Not at all. So we cannot really look upon what happened as a scenario that was directed in central control from Tehran. But speaking holistically, the new orientation of Iran with exemplification of coalition forces, including Russia, because Tehran today working together in coalition force with Russia, it means that the new combination creating not just sectors acting together in a kind of synchronization against Israel. There is a huge plan, first of all, not just regarding action, but basically regarding the force building of Hezbollah, Hamas. And if we are speaking about Hussein Salami, the commander of the Iranian the Revolutionary Guards, he declared in August that now they are preparing the end of Israel, now that the Palestinians and Hezbollah are ready to march with infantry forces to take the lands, because he declared missiles themselves cannot take the land. So there is a real plan, not just to make a synchronization, but to build a coalition force. By that, they are really expressing the new role of Iran as a regional superpower.
Indeed. General Gavish, I'd like to hear your perspective on this, considering the fact that indeed, as General Ha-Cohen mentioned, the commander of the Revolutionary Guards, Major General Hussein Salami, he highlighted on multiple occasions since August, when he made that remark at the first instance, that while the Islamic Republic is bolstering its various proxies throughout the region. I already mentioned which countries are involved. Of course, I omitted the Gaza Strip, where the Iranian proxy Palestinian Islamic Jihad is present, of course, very strongly, together with its ally, the Islamist Hamas organization. All those various forces are bolstering their aerial capabilities, and in a concrete effort to then overwhelm Israel in a first attack would be then a aerial attack, of course, by surface-to-surface missiles, drones, and other capacities from that sorts, and then allowing then that breathing room in order to establish ground maneuvers and control certain territories that would then, of course, evolve into nobody really knows. How do you see this then, Israel preparing to deal with such a challenge?
Yeah, that's. I think this is really an important question, and I would say that firstly, if we're looking on the Iranian strategy, they are consistent. It's not that we are seeing now something new on their strategy, because looking at their strategy, they were working through proxies for years and years. They were building the power in Lebanon with the Hezbollah. We know that they're trying to penetrate and to establish their forces within Syria. This is also something that happened. It's happening for years. We see what is happening with Yemen and others. So this concept of the Iranians of working through proxies, I think that what we see lately is that maybe it's kind of a next step from their point of view of how much they are putting, I would say, means and how much the efforts are there. But as a strategy, I think that this is a strategy that we see for a long time. The other thing, which if we're looking on the trends, and this is something new for the last few years, is that, people have to understand, it's not that we might be in a war with the Iranian. We are now in a war situation, maybe in a very low, I would say, level of it, but also directly. They tried in the last few years, they tried to send drones to Israel, even missiles 2 years ago. So it's not that we didn't see it. What happened lately in the Ramadan really kind of brought it up, but I think it's not something that we should look at it in one point, and this is what is happening now. We have to look on the trend. So you're completely right. This is complex. They're trying to do it from different angles. I'm not sure that they are very correlated within themselves with the Hamas and with the other organization. Each one of them still have his own interest and not only the Iranian interest, but in some points, they kind of, I would say, jointly looking on their interest in sometimes. Ramadan is always a good time for them. We saw what happened in the last Ramadan. It was also something around it. So I think in general, we could say that this is something this is a trend that we see for quite a long time. And now we have to look and see, and I think this is basically what is the Israeli government is looking at now. He's really trying to understand if we have now a new level that we have to do something maybe even proactively against it, or is it something pointedly around the Ramadan that few things happened and okay, let's see how do we contain the situation and how do we go from here. We have to remember that the last attacks that we saw during the Ramadan time was from the Palestinian organizations led by the Hamas that tried to shoot from Lebanon and also from Syria. By the way, not with a big success. Majority of the rockets that were shot were intercepted. The rockets that were shot from Syria, one of them fell into Syria, another one into Jordan. So it was not a big success from their point of view. By the way, also, they were trying to, I would say, try to see if the Israeli Arabs would be part of it. Also, this is what they wanted that would happen, and basically it didn't happen. So from a operational tactical point of view, I don't think that they succeeded. But we still have to look at it, of course, from a strategic point of view and to understand, is that a trend that now is going forward, or is it something that happened around the Ramadan like last year?
Indeed, of course, there was no true coordination between Hezbollah and Hamas, despite the post-conflagration photo op. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Oren, because General Ha-Cohen mentioned earlier also the Russian-Iranian axis or cooperation on the military front. We also saw a number of joint maneuvers with China involved in that context. And it seems like Iran is trying to play within the framework of strategic power competition, where it's establishing, despite the National Security Council's position in Washington that it doesn't view this matter, but Iran is trying to establish itself as an ally of both Beijing and Moscow vis-a-vis the United States and its clientele, its umbrella countries and states. this brings, of course, to mind a statement made by Major General Tarek Kelman, who holds the Iran file in the IDF just a couple of years ago during one of the conferences of the INSS, where he highlighted that Israel and Iran are in a sort of strategic competition with one another over regional matters. What can you say within that context?
Everyone here in the region's capitals looks at what happens in Washington, and regardless of statements emanating from Washington, obviously the trend is for the United States to get out gradually, not fully, from the Middle East and pivot east, because it cannot invest all of its resources in one single region. The priority goes east to China, some of the rest now to Russia versus Ukraine. There is less for the Middle East, and therefore in Tehran, in Riyadh, we saw how the Saudis behave. Perhaps even in Cairo, there was a recent report regarding Egyptian rapprochement with Russia, not with Iran. But nevertheless, people see China as the emerging power, while the United States is withdrawing. Russia is perhaps a secondary power now in China's orbit. However, the question from Israel's point of view is how to deal with the inherent contradiction which usually political leaders have to grapple with, not the military command, because wars are not fought between military forces. They are fought between societies. And Hezbollah and Hamas, which is, of course, much weaker than Hezbollah, they do not intend to win over the Israeli Defense Forces in a fight. They know that they will be obliterated in such a fight. They want to win over the Israeli society. And the way to do it is by terror. Terror is not only an attack in the West Bank, also the rockets, most of the rockets held by Hezbollah and Hamas are not accurate enough to hit any particular target, but this is not the intention. The intention is to kill as many Israelis and damage as much property as possible, so that when the stock is taken at the end of the campaign, they will come back to their own audience and say, we held our own against mighty Israel. The precision-guided munitions are indeed intended to hit strategic targets, infrastructure, military, especially air bases, and the like. But the general tenor of the campaign is against the Israeli population, so that at the end of the campaign, they will be depicted as at least drawing with Israel, and the draw with the IDF is a victory in Arab and Muslim eyes.
Because what they sell to their public is their intention to annihilate the Jewish state, which ultimately the public is within that composition.
But Israeli politicians do not want to tell their publics, yes, we are doomed to fight forever with these hostile forces. Politicians want to promise their electorate a better future. And the two cannot coexist. Either you are doomed to live by the sword, or you may get some peace and quiet and prosper. And politicians try to depict themselves as being the better guardians of the civilians, but nevertheless, they want to repress the memory of the threat.
Well, last week we saw, among others, also attacks by Iranian militias towards U.S. forces in Syria once again. The Americans, of course, retaliated against Iranian infrastructure in Syria. And within that context, also, there was a postponement of the departure of the USS George W. Bush aircraft carrier and the strike group accompanying it from the Middle East towards the United States. Instead of departing from Turkey back to America, this aircraft carrier was repositioned to the international waters off the shore of Syria to protect, according to the Pentagon, of course, U.S. forces in Syria. At the same time, in a show of force, also, even though usually they do not publicize too much of submarine movement in waterways, the United States announced that it is deploying a nuclear submarine to the region, something that the Iranians didn't take very lightly and tried to belittle this statement. General Ha-Cohen, to what degree does the American administration currently in office, despite its lack of at least will to involve itself too much in regional matters rather than actually be more decisive, to what degree does it see its role as substantive and able to make a true difference that would calm the situation down?
The Americans must really face a demand for reconsideration of their whole approach regarding the Middle East, what happened in Saudi Arabia with the transformation to Iran, the same in the Emirates, and they are really challenged. Therefore, they must come to declare that they are reconsidered everything, and really they are not at all beginning to tell the appropriate story, because the whole alliances, we spoke about it, between Iran, Hezbollah, Houthi, Hamas, is not only directed to one main purpose, to demolish the Jewish state. This is not enough powerful in order to unite all of these forces. They are actually united through the main purpose to save Al-Aqsa. So they found that there is one common denominator uniting between Shia and Sunni, and this is Al-Aqsa that's becoming definitely more important to the new Islam than Mecca, because this Al-Aqsa united all of them right now. And all what happened by just explaining it as directing itself to a struggle of Al-Aqsa, it is a new religious war, and the American, with their whole perspective, are not really preparing themselves to begin to conceptualize the whole situation. Because what happened is that even if all the attacks from Syria and Lebanon against Israel not succeeded tactically and physically, they succeeded to emphasize the message that they are struggling for Al-Aqsa. And this is a new story at all.
Very interesting indeed, even though it's quite a new reality at hand, because the Shiites never regarded Jerusalem as holy, and it's only recent Islamic rulings that have focused more on the liberation of Islamic lands rather than a particular mosque.
But I'm just mentioning the Al-Aqsa Day that was declared by Khomeini
Indeed.
In the last week of Ramadan. It is a new Islam.
Yeah. General Gavish, I'd like to ask you, the United States, obviously, within the context of strategic power competition, is aware of China's increasing involvement, also now on the diplomatic front, as General Ha-Cohen mentioned, the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran under Chinese guidance, with the announcement made in Persian, Arabic, and Chinese rather than English, which was not mentioned at all within this context. The answer, though, to the various challenges at hand, we spoke, of course, about the aerial threats posed to Israel by the various sectors, including from Yemen, including from the northern sector, and eastern sectors, particularly also Iraq and Iran proper. The answer was an integrated aerial defense system among all U.S. partners in the region under the umbrella of CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command. Is this something that is now threatened by China's increased involvement?
Well, I don't think so. Maybe the Chinese involvement in, I would say, even in the contrary, is this is something that would like to, from the United States point of view, I think that they would like to strengthen this cooperation within the governments in the Middle East. So I don't think that it is threatening. I would like to refer to this issue of the new situation that we are at. I think that we really need to look at it as, and Amir, I heard him talking about it in few occasions. I think we should look at things in proportion. There are some terrorist attack, but we need to remember what happened in the Ramadan, in Al-Aqsa, in last years. This is not the first time that we have some situation in Al-Aqsa. I think what is happening with the Iranians is that the Iranians are not only talking to Israel, the Iranians are also talking to other audience, which is Arab countries like Saudi, like others, that I think that what they are doing, it's not only aimed toward Israel, it's also aimed toward their willingness to be a superpower in the region and to have some relations with Arab countries. So I think this is also an audience that when they are talking and when they are talking about Al-Aqsa, this is also something that is being done in order to be closer to those countries like Saudi, as we mentioned before. So I think we should also look at it from this context. And again, the Hamas was trying to do something that with the boiled, I would say, the situation in Israel, but they didn't succeed. We have to remember it.
Mr. Oren.
Life in Israel is in general very good. This may not be paradise, but it is closer to heaven than to hell.
The 5th happiest country in the world according to the latest ranking, so that is something. But I'd like to thank...
I absolutely agree with Amir about that.
Well, thank you so much, General Ha-Cohen, General Gavish, and Mr. Oren for being part of today's panel. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until next time, shalom.